Hey, what's up guys? I'm Xeno, and welcome back to my Xenoblade 3 lore series. And in this video, I'm going to be covering the history of Alpha and Alpha's plan. Spoiler warning for the entire Xenoblade series, this video is going to contain spoilers for all the numbered Xenoblade games. So, if you haven't played any one of the numbered games, do yourself a favor and experience those amazing games before spoiling yourself. And on screen is my recommended play order. With that, let's get started. The story of Alpha begins at the end of Xenoblade 1 and 2, after the conduit disappears. Before the conduit disappeared, it was connecting Ontos to Numa and Logos. This granted Ontos its morality, and it's part of what compelled Ontos to betray Zanza in the way that it did. During Xenoblade 1, Ontos is influenced by the wills of both Klaus and Zanza. Zanza wished for the power of a god, while Klaus wished that he could undo the mistakes he made. Ontos never outright confronts Zanza, but does betray him by giving Zanza's creation the opportunity to overcome him. Without the morality granted by Numa and Logos, Ontos may very well have taken a much different path in enacting these contradictory wishes. Alpha is essentially Ontos without any morality or compassion, but is still influenced by Zanza and Klaus's wishes/commands. So, after the conduit disappears, why doesn't Alpha just start its plan of departure right then and there? Well, for one, the conduit is gone, which is what granted Ontos such immense power in the first place. However, Alpha was aware that a new source of power would present itself. This power is that which is provided by the Fog World, a world created by the immense force between the two worlds approaching each other. In an Infinity scene in Future Redeemed, Ace states that fog beasts are, quote, a sign of the strained world that the Black Fog birthed, unquote. We know the Black Fog is a product of matter between the two worlds getting closer and closer together, and A outright confirms that an entire unstable world was formed from this phenomenon. This phenomenon is an immense source of power and serves as a very good explanation for how something like Origin could even exist in a post-conduit world. With this quickly approaching power source in mind, Alpha formulates its plan to create a new world. The first step in this plan is to provide the people of Bionis with the Ontos Core. Using the Ontos Core, they will be able to communicate with Allrest and learn about the impending doom that is the worlds annihilating each other. Allrest already has Numa, so they have a reasonable explanation for it already having these capabilities. Alpha presents a solution for their impending annihilation in the form of Origin, but really it is just a cover for Alpha's true intentions. In the process of constructing Origin, Logos was reconstructed. How this was done is not exactly clear, but I theorize that Numa may have possessed the data necessary to recreate Logos. In Xenoblade 2, Klaus gives all data stored in Elysium to Numa. In 2, during Numa's death, she asks Logos to help her use Ion to destroy Elysium. Logos asks her what living was like, and Numa responds, despite the Logos core already being destroyed at that point. To me, this establishes that when an Aegis uses Ion, some kind of backup of the core itself may be uploaded to Ion, and Ion connected to Elysium, therefore Numa would receive that data. Additionally, the reason that Numa asked Logos for help was that she had given away her core to Rex, so she had to rely on the Logos backup to be able to use Ion, as without her core she would not have authorization to use Ion. That being established, I theorize that Numa sent Ontos the necessary data via light in order to reconstruct Logos. Then, Logos was reconstructed on the world of Bionis to be used as a part of Origin's system. Alpha designs Origin with these core features in mind. First, Alpha and the World Spirit are to be kept in the heart of Origin, and the World Spirit is confined within Origin to prevent others from overthrowing Alpha as the avatar for the World Spirit. Additionally, Alpha is the most powerful administrator of Origin. If you want to know more about the World Spirit and how avatars factor into all that, check out my last video where I explain all of it, and come back to this video. Second, Origin harvests the energy produced from the attraction between the two worlds, and by extension, the Fog World. Third, Origin contains data from all things in the previous worlds and uses modified core crystal technology to store this data. 4, and this one is very important, Origin's functions can be heavily influenced by the emotions of the people stored within Origin. 5th, Origin's administrator status is granted to others based on a combination of factors. The most important factor is the backing of the emotions of the people stored within Origin. This factor is able to overpower other factors. The other factors are the possession of a queen's heart/soul, that would be Nia or Melia, and an Aegis core, primarily Numa or Logos. Depending on which core is possessed, the ideology of the core itself and whether the avatar is in agreement, and whether the emotions of those within Origin align with a given core, the power granted to an administrator by Origin can vary greatly. The great majority of these core features would not have been revealed to those building Origin. From their perspective, Origin's only function is to act as an arc to recreate the worlds after they are destroyed. Origin was not entirely designed by Alpha, but these features would kind of be Alpha's Trojan horse, which would then set up a series of events that would eventually put him in a position to complete his departure. Alpha was able to predict with decent accuracy that the wills of the people within Origin would spur the creation of Mobius/Zed, and that this would lead to the creation of Ionios. And furthermore, the foundation and flourishing of a rebellion that would form between the two worlds. In other words, the city. Alpha desired to have new life form from both worlds, and then to preserve that life on the Ark while ending Ionios and creating a new world. However, Alpha would not be able to accurately predict the actions of people who are not bound by the passage of fate, or the flow, as Zed calls it. Those who are not bound by the passage of fate would include administrators of Origin and those who are granted power from administrators of Origin. At the time of Future Redeemed, specific people not bound would be Nia, Melia, Zed, Shulk, Rex, Matthew, and Gondor. Additionally, as long as they oppose the passage of fate as determined by Alpha, those empowered by the Ouroboros Stone and those possessing Mobius cores should not be bound tightly to the passage of fate. For example, after its first attempted departure, Alpha was most likely able to predict that in the future it could use Nile as an avatar, because her ideology aligned with Alpha. This is similar but not the same as how Zanza waited for an avatar, and that would be Shulk. Once Alpha felt that the people of the city were ready to depart, and in my opinion probably wanted to wait until enough gene mixing occurred where all the city natives had ancestors from both worlds, Alpha then attempted for the first time to enact the final step of his plan, but was thwarted by Rex, Shulk, and Zed. Alpha was probably able to predict relatively accurately up until that first clash. After that, the next major event that Alpha would not be able to predict is that Gondor would split Ontos in two using Numa and the Sword of the End, and even past that, and using Logos and the Sword of the End to split Alpha and Nile at the end of Future Redeemed. For its second attempt, Alpha understood that it needed to do some things differently to be successful. Alpha began to utilize the Fog Beast to destroy old life and capture city residents. Normally, the worlds are kept in a stable enough state by Origin that fog rifts do not open up, but Alpha exacerbated this to its benefit, and this is most apparent in the final battle where a giant fog rift is being utilized by Alpha as a source of power. Interestingly, Zed chooses not to utilize the fog world, and I believe that this is probably because Zed's ultimate goal is for Ionios to exist forever, and he does not want to cause Ionios to become more unstable than it already is. Alpha's plan, on the other hand, involved the destruction of the worlds in the very near future, so Alpha doesn't really care that utilizing the fog world may make Ionios unstable. Alpha used Nile as an avatar to increase its power, but of course that ended up not really working out. Unfortunately for Alpha, it was unable to carry out its plan and was ultimately defeated. And I think that explains pretty much everything there is to know about Alpha. I think that going into the stuff about Alpha here is actually pretty important for the main part of the story. One of the biggest kind of questions of the main game was, how is Mobius even able to exist? And also, why are emotions so heavily involved in the story and actually influencing the plot? I think Alpha setting up this departure serves as a pretty good explanation for why a lot of things are the way they are inside of Ionios. Of course, it does get more complicated than that when you go into other things, but for the emotion stuff and how that influences Origin, I think this serves as a good explanation. And I do want to go into a couple other tidbits about Alpha before I end the video. So many people questioned why Alpha was using the Monado 1 and not at least the Monado 2, since the Monado 1 is canonically the weakest version of Ontos' Monado. The reason Alpha uses Monado 1, in my opinion, is because Alpha is ultimately still enacting the wishes of Klaus and Zanza, and that Monado is most iconic of Zanza, who of course is also Klaus. The Monado 1 being weaker is a misconception. As stated many times in the series, the appearance of a Monado is an illusion. Ultimately, its power is useless without the will of the user, so it might as well be the Monado Zanza uses in the final boss fight of 1. It really makes no difference in its actual ability. Secondly, there is a potential plot hole in that Ontos, Numa, and Logos all exist in Ionios at the same time. Yet despite this, Ontos remains as Alpha, despite Numa and Logos previously granting Ontos its morality. Shouldn't Alpha have been stopped as soon as the worlds came together? Theoretically, yes. But I theorize that Alpha had predicted that this would happen, and in a self-preservation measure, it preemptively disabled itself from acknowledging any attempts by Numa or Logos to reason. And I believe that there's even a meta joke made about this relatively early in Future Redeemed when Matthew says,
"If they won't listen, I'll make them listen with my fists."
And then the game ends with what is essentially Numa punching Ontos in the face because Ontos won't listen to Numa or Logos anymore. And finally, just a little detail about the light motes in Future Redeemed. Notice that in the main game of Xenoblade 3, after the party is formed when killing monsters, the monsters evaporate into white motes. But in Future Redeemed, all the monsters evaporate into black motes. This is the only time in Xenoblade 3 that we see black motes. As for exactly why this is, I believe that monsters which evaporate into black motes might somehow be being converted into fog beasts by Alpha. This is backed up by similar black motes being seen in Future Connected when normal beasts are turned into fog beasts. Interestingly, there are still yellow and red motes present in Future Redeemed, which could hint towards their purpose. I might do a video on motes in the future, as I've looked into the light motes quite a bit, and there is a general rule for which color motes appear in different circumstances. And the game follows this accurately based on different story beats and situations in the game, so look forward to a video on that in the future. And that about does it for this video. I've made a lot of progress since my last video in figuring things out, and now I pretty much have a full timeline down of everything that happens, as well as an explanation for pretty much all the different mechanics that the story presents. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to present it all yet, as it's a lot of information and a lot of it is interconnected. I think the next video I make is going to be a pretty big one, which goes into the mechanics of the Ouroboros and Mobius powers, and probably the full timeline events as established by Xenoblade 3. To be honest, I've had this video on Alpha's plan written for a while now, but I wanted to hold off on finishing it until I was mostly done with sorting through and thinking out the information for the next video, because I don't want to publish this video and then find out that I missed something in the process of making the next video. So yeah. Also, I want to note that I purposely avoided watching other theory videos since I want to try and put everything together myself with minimal outside influence. So I apologize if there's anything that I missed that's covered in other theory videos. And just one final note. It's become clear to me in the process of researching all this that the rules of Ionios are set and elastic. A lot of rules of the world in Ionios are meant to be bent and broken. This, combined with a lack of direct lore explanation in Xenoblade 3, inevitably leads to people coming to different conclusions about the lore and how things work, as there are a lot of different perspectives you can view it from, and of course that's totally fine. But I do want to note that recently, since around Xenoblade 3's release or so, it seems like the Xenoblade community tends to be more hostile in their disagreements. And it's pretty disappointing, since the Xenoblade community used to be one of the most welcoming fandoms I've seen. So I just want to put out a general reminder to everyone in the Xenoblade community that we're all just having fun here. So let's all do our best to keep the Xenoblade community a positive and welcoming space for everyone. And with that being said, everyone have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.